With the second of Rare's crossover stories, The Legend of Monkey Island, having concluded last Thursday, I think it's time to address the question, which of these sets of tall tales are better and more worth playing? Now these of course are A Pirate's Life and The Legend of Monkey Island. Now the first thing you've got to establish here is that both sets of tall tales are very, very different in the way that they approach storytelling and gameplay. So to compare them, I had to come up with some categories, so after giving my thoughts on each tall tale, I'll give a judgment. It's also important to note that this is just my opinion, and while I have several biases towards one set of tall tales rather than the other, I'll do my best to focus on what Rare's created without the background of the previous franchises. But without any more talk, let's just get into comparing them. My first category is combat. Now Sea of Thieves is a pirate game and every player loves a good fight, but Pirate's Life for me had so much of this in it. Whether we're fighting ghostly Spaniards or sirens or ocean crawlers. In fact, both phantoms and ocean crawlers were a huge addition to the game, and we weren't just fighting skeletons every 5 minutes. So, whilst the majority of PvE combat in Sea of Thieves isn't like a huge challenge, Pirate Life isn't an exception to that, but it doesn't need to be. But what it does have to be is engaging and fun. Now, to be honest, Monkey Island really falls down for me here, because at the end of the journey to Melee Island, for example, it involves us fighting LeChuck's ghostly skeletal crew, but they're absolutely useless. I didn't take one hit of damage from them, and neither did my crewmate, and they quickly evaporated when we sprayed them with some root beer. So this was a really underwhelming fight for a tall tale, an example of some really poor combat, which wasn't engaging and didn't keep me on my toes. The fight with LeChuck, while it's an awesome ending cutscene, things quickly died down and the ending duel felt very low stakes in terms of story as opposed to Pirate's Life, with this epic battle around Davy Jones's fortress, with ghost ships battling several famous NPCs from the Sea of Thieves such as Captain Pendragon. If the Pirate Lord and Guybrush had stuck around and some of LeChuck's crew had maybe joined the fight, you'd have already had a more engaging and far much better ending to the set of tall tales. And, come on Rare, you give us a ship chase with chase cannons, but only the NPCs can fire them? So for me, better combat has to go for Pirate's Life here. While perhaps it wasn't balanced with enough puzzles, which I'll talk about in a minute, it was just far more engaging and interesting than Monkey Island's combat. Fitting in nicely with this is puzzle solving and problem solving within the game. Now, a good tall tale has to have a balance between combat and puzzles. Now, I don't think either set of tall tales got that balance right, particularly by keeping both very engaging. But Monkey Island did have some really long, arduous puzzles, which I'll talk about later in pacing. However, the puzzles were more intricate. They were well thought out and well designed in Monkey Island, which just wasn't really the case in Pirate's Life, where I thought they felt a bit more simple and traditional, just comparing both games in retrospect. Now, Monkey Island really brought players some new concepts with its puzzle systems, and honestly, my lack of any sort of problem-solving ability led my crewmates to do most of the work there. But my point is, Monkey Island's puzzles brought something fresh, different, new to the game, and if you're more of a problem-solving person and you like that aspect within video games, Monkey Island is something you should be playing, without a doubt. I think this round, while some of the puzzles did weigh it down a bit, Monkey Island has to win here because of its really unique take on the Sea of Thieves experience. Pace is my third category here, and for me the clear winner is just Pirate's Life. Now, there are 5 tall tales, so Rare's spaced out the storyline very, very well, and it's created a really immersive experience for each tall tale individually, so it takes up maybe an hour or an hour and a half, perhaps 2 hours at most. Now this is an excellent time frame because I'm still engaged with the story and it doesn't take up a huge chunk of my day doing practically one thing for an ending that is just less satisfying than I really want it to be, especially in Monkey Island's case. So obviously there were 6 original Monkey Island video games. Now if I'm wrong, tell me in the comments. But I believe that these tall tales are set afterwards in the timeline, but if they're trying to make each tall tale like its own video game, I think they certainly succeeded. Because if we're looking at the first tall tale, The Journey to Melee Island, I do actually have very little complaints about pacing, because it was a really nice contained area. I felt we got to explore, uncover the secrets of the town, and uncover the mystery of what's happened to Guybrush. And despite the underwhelming ending, which I talked about earlier, it was an excellent tall tale with some really good pacing and could be completed in about 2 hours, maybe less. But Tales 2 and 3 were honestly a chore. Some of the puzzles stretched out for such a long time, and my entire crew got really confused, and it just seemed endless, puzzle after puzzle after puzzle in this huge expansive space. In Tall Tale 2 especially, I didn't really like the design of the island. It felt very similar, and after a couple of hours of just endlessly going through these, it felt really painful, and there were being so little breaks to show development in the story. It just seemed like everything got explained to you at the end. And while I love the ending cutscene with the ship battle in the large cavern in Tall Tale 3, I'd have definitely been more excited for it if I hadn't been doing puzzles with my crew for 3 hours or 4 hours before. Maybe you've got a different opinion on this, and like massively longer Tall Tales, but it just didn't work for me due to the really underwhelming endings and the very little story development within the Tall Tale, and it just all being revealed at the end. Now, despite my enjoyment of the journey to Melee Island, the first Tall Tale's pacing, I've really got to give this to Pirate's Life. So next we've actually got the storyline itself. Now, this is going to be the most controversial category here, because I haven't played the original Monkey Island games, unlike one member of my crew has, and I didn't enjoy the storyline for Monkey Island as much as I did with Pirate's Life. But I'm going to try and look at points that don't have anything to do with the original games here, and just simply on what Sea of Thieves has done. So, with the desperate link of LeChuck popping out of nowhere, he wants to take over the Sea of Thieves, and he's got very little connection with anything to do with the main story. It doesn't do anything to develop the main story with his introduction, really, except that one adventure, which in itself just leads up to Monkey Island. And I'm very big on the Sea of Thieves original story being absolutely central to the game, and the crossovers kind of have to feed into that, not be their own thing. So, Pirate's Life can be critiqued for neglecting Flameheart and his storyline, and it being really underdeveloped, and it did do numerous things to enhance the game as well. So it introduced Phantoms and Ocean Crawlers, giving them a backstory. I've talked about that before. They're still in the game, they have a huge impact on the game, especially with Thoughts of the Forgotten and all the stuff we have now. But it developed the lore surrounding the merfolk and the sirens as well, and not only this, it developed the Sea of the Damned as a location, rather than just an excuse to respawn. It created the Dark Brethren, developing characters like Wanda and Duke, as well as the mysterious Captain, which we still have huge influence in the game world today. Therefore, because of all the influence of the Pirate's Life on the main game, and the huge changes that affect the main game today because of it, and its overall storyline, I'm going to have to give this category to Pirate's Life. So currently, Pirate's Life is winning 3-1 here. But my final category does help out Monkey Island, and that is the characters themselves. I think it's really important to have really dynamic NPCs within a story. So we've got Guybrush, we've got Elaine, we've got LeChuck, and all the other various characters around the tavern and around Melee Island. It feels so unique and developed, as if the devs really cared about the characters they were creating here. Their backstory and their interaction with the players shows the nostalgia they had for the original games and how much they liked them. Now, I particularly love Stan, for example, and how he would tell the players off for trying to steal his key in the quest for Guybrush if they hadn't locked him in the cupboard first. I remember we got stuck on that one. But what a great example of a really dynamic and interactive NPC. Pirate's Life, on the other hand, of course, has several original characters from the Pirates of the Caribbean, but for me, they didn't feel massively developed or interesting. Several lazy character introductions, like the Gold Hoarder just sort of appearing with no explanation to how he survived after the Shores of Gold. While the story itself had good pacing, gave awesome changes to the game and holds up well today, the characters for me, they just weren't that exciting compared to the plethora of dynamic NPCs dotted around Melee Island, and therefore I'm giving the category of characters to Monkey Island. So after all of that, in my books, which Tall Tale wins? Well, the score does fall 3-2 to A Pirate's Life. Now, I enjoyed both sets of these Tall Tales, and with the majority of things created by Rare in this game, it just makes me love it even more. However, for me, the biggest issue that lets Monkey Island down compared to Pirate's Life is the poor pacing in my view, and the overemphasis on these endless puzzles which just makes the limited combat really fall short of what it could have been. Now, this is of course just my opinion. I love both of these sets of Tall Tales, and they're amazing additions to the game for me, but Pirate's Life just takes the edge, even despite its flaws. Thanks for watching, everyone, and don't forget to tell me which was your favourite and why in the comments. If you haven't played them, I highly recommend it. So I'll see you in the next one.